and welcome to Have You Seen My Film, a Kinema conversation series. Today, I get to speak with the Chana Ginelle Ewing, founder of the marketing and comms agency littlebigworld. Chana specializes in digital marketing for film and media and focuses on clients and campaigns that propel queer imagination and care-centered politics forward. She has directed digital campaigns for 18 major entertainment releases and contributing to at least one Oscar nomination and at least 6 Emmy nominations. She has cultivated and leveraged a network of over 250 celebrities, influencers, and creators from diverse backgrounds and experience, and securing vital cultural resonance for broadcast projects and for social impact causes. I got to see much of this firsthand through her last company, Genie. On top of that, she's the author of the best-selling children's book, The ABCs of Racism, and she serves as a trusted advisor and board member for various women's groups and film organizations, including Black Film Space. So all of this makes Chana the most qualified to discuss with us how to engage marginalized communities or any type of community or underrepresented communities. All of that we're going to dive into with definitions. But first, thank you so much, Chana, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Christy. I'm excited to chat with you as usual.
I'm always excited to chat with you. It's like I always learn something new every time we chat. Cool. And as people know, I tend to read off my questions. So I'm going to make sure I would stick my notes here. So don't mind me if you see my eyes darting around. But I do want to start with the basics. And so for the purposes of this chat and these videos, I'd love to focus the work that you do on your film and media projects. So let's go with definitions. I said marginal audiences. I said underserved, underrepresented. But I guess how would you kind of define the communities that you work with?
Absolutely. So I'm going to back up a little bit about definitions because the children's book that you mentioned is actually a definitions book, and it's an ABC of equality. We definitely do R is for racism, but it's equality more broadly. So just to do a note about, I'm obsessed with definitions. That's all. I think a lot about how we define things and the expansive possibility in that definition. So when we're thinking about marginalized communities, I like to first say what you're really talking about is a socio-cultural group, right? And socio-cultural groups are folks who have shared social backgrounds, shared cultural backgrounds, and largely shared historical experiences, right? So social, cultural, historical experiences. And there's a lot of different social cultural groups, right? So it's like, who are we talking about in particular? So I think it's great to, like, if you're thinking about it in terms of a broad term, you can use the phrase social cultural. And then when we're talking about specifically, like, which of those groups are we talking about? We're talking about Black folks. Are we talking about Black folks in the Northeast? Or are we talking about queer folks? Are we talking about Gen Z queer folks? So it's nice to, like, in this moment in time, when we talk about communities, get super specific about the communities that we're referring to. And then when we're speaking more broadly, we can talk about, okay, right now we're going to talk about social cultural groups, historically marginalized groups, but you want to really kind of speak to the specific group that you're discussing.
But how we've been kind of framing it is in terms of audience targeting. So if we're saying that this film is for a certain group, would you say it's important to then really define specifically who those specific groups are and why?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And also to, even when you're doing that targeting, to think about what type of targeting we're doing. So for instance, I wouldn't necessarily say people who enjoy running. It's like a social cultural group, right? That's more like hobby. So are we defining our audience by a different category? Are we talking about hobbies and interests? Or are we talking about demographics and psychographics, right? So first, like, getting clear around, like, what are we using to talk about the people that we're serving? And then how do we get more specific? Because when you break it up around hobbies and interests, there's going to be a little bit of different targeting that's going to be possible, right? Just in terms of digital marketing, you're going to have some tools that are going to be available to you when you're doing hobbies and interests versus when you are thinking about people and we want to avail yourself of organizations, influencers. So it's a little bit of the strategy even may change a little bit depending on the type of targeting that you're going to do.
And it makes sense. It's a combination of, I guess, demographics representing kind of who you are, how you identify, and then hobbies are more like your these are activities or behaviors, actions that you take. So you led me to my next question of, so what is digital marketing? So it's radio, social media influencers. Can you give me a broad definition or specific? How do you define digital marketing?
Absolutely. So broadly speaking, it's how are you targeting people online, right? Like how are you using the tools of the internet to reach people? So whether that's like an SEO optimized website, is it email newsletters, is it social media, influencer, it's affiliate marketing. So how are you availing yourself of the online space to reach, target, and connect with a particular audience?
And so it's that a combination. So can you go even more granular? What is affiliate marketing?
Oh, yeah. So affiliate marketing is two ways, right? One of the main ways that you see affiliate marketing is actually when you're looking at an article, right? Say you're on a blog and then they have a link in the blog, and that link will send you back to another website, right? So sometimes that link, that person who did the blog will get some money for including that link. And typically they're supposed to disclose that. So a lot of online magazines like
A
Wired.
wire cutter?
Yeah,
Yeah, or
Wired.
wired too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so a lot of like online retailers do it. Actually, some Substack folks are now doing affiliate marketing. Anyone who does it should actually disclose that like these are sponsored links, because the person who's doing that article or the platform itself gets some money back. Another way that you can see affiliate marketing is actually on social media. So when you see people say link in bio, the links that influencers will have and send you back to, typically it'll say like, you know, Abercrombie.com, blah, 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 / Christie.
Have you also seen, because I was just shopping on Abercrombie last night, so I feel like you knew this already.
You would get those dollars if someone used your link in like your TikTok profile or your Instagram profile. So that's affiliate.
Right, right. It makes sense. As an influencer creator, you're building trust with your audience. And so, of course, it's a revenue stream, but you want your audience to know that you're being paid to do this. And I think we'll come up a little bit as we talk about some of the film stuff. So kind of keeping in our realm of definitions of kind of how, what the social cultural groups are, what digital marketing is, what type of film projects do you work on typically or like to work on?
Yeah. So I really love films that are actually focused almost exclusively on historically marginalized socio-cultural groups. So we're talking Black folks, queer folks, disabled communities. I say all of those audiences are beyond their marginalizations as folks who have really just drove culture, the arts and entertainment, and also I would say like helping to right the wrongs, historical wrongs in this country. So things that have been janky, I would say racism, sexism, ableism, all of that, right? Like, so I like to center the communities that have been most impacted by systems of oppression and have been responsible for turning things around. I mean, we're still living in, several oppressive systems. Like, we are at the best possible place, particularly going into this new administration. That
Mhm.
said, there are some things that have happened over the last few decades. And how do we center the folks who have really led the way? And those are the type of films that I work on.
So going back to what you just said about centering, can you define that for us? When in the context of film marketing and digital marketing, what does it mean to center the audiences you're trying to reach?
Absolutely. So when we're thinking about centering the audiences that we're trying to reach, the first approach is to move from humility. So even if you share the same identities, you share the same interests, assume well, I don't want to say don't assume that you don't know anything because you do, right? Like bring your full self, bring the stories that you know to the marketing, to the film, all that good stuff. But assume that you don't know everything and get into research mode a little bit, become a little bit curious about the audience, do some sleuthing online on social media, put in some hashtags, some search terms. If you're looking, we're going to go back to that. I think we used a runner example before, right?
Yes,
So if we want to
correct.
go back to that runner as example, Black runners in New York City, right? Like do some research and see what comes up. Like along those stories, like, who are some of the influencers, some of the organizations that already exist. See if you can interview some folks, learn about their communities, and how you might insert this story into the work that they're doing in those communities. So focus on building relationships and focus on learning. I would say that's how you center.
That makes complete sense. I want to go to a phrase that you use on your website, and I mentioned in the opening because I thought it was really beautiful. I want you to dig into it. But you, when describing your company, Little Big World, you include the phrase that you want to work on propelling queer imagination and care-centered politics forward. Again, it's beautiful. Can you break that down? What does that mean to you, and what does that mean as you execute your campaigns?
Absolutely. So like to say that queer thinking changes everything, and what I mean by that is really that queer identity, queer thinking is about looking beyond defaults, looking beyond binaries, looking beyond what's already there. I actually think it's a pretty expansive way of looking at the world. It's a relationship centered way of looking at the world. And then if you layer in that whole care-centered politics, I thought that I wanted to include that because typically marketing, you're marketing a product for profit, right? And so the point of marketing is to help industry, right? Like you're trying to
Yeah,
sell things, right?
this is
That's
true.
the, that's my discipline, right? I'm essentially trying to put something in front of you to sell you on it, right? And so when I layer in that centered politics piece, is that we're keeping profit and sales in mind, sure, because we are in business or we are trying to move something, right? But really thinking about well-being, really thinking about care, really thinking about connection. And if you are bringing people together and if you are showing care and people feel cared for in the marketing that you're
Mm.
doing, will feel thought of, they feel considered. Like those are KPIs for us, right? Like it's not just about like how many butts in seats, but who are the butts in the seats? How do they feel when they're sitting there? Do they feel like the story is resonating with them? Or do they feel like they're connected to the storytellers? Do they feel like it was a good experience getting there? Like all of that is what, we want to think about when we're putting together campaigns.
Oh, it makes sense. And do you often do between the learning ahead of time and being thoughtful and care centered and working with reaching, bringing films to these audiences? Do you do preview screenings or do you do strategy meetings or what does that kind of look like in practice in advance of the film release?
Absolutely. So, in practice, it looks like asking a bunch of different questions, which I can get into, but also, yes, preview screenings, Zoom calls, meetings, going out for coffee, like light intros, like the light touch, right? A human touch connection, but it's beyond like before you get to the, hey, this film is released, here's our social media toolkit. Can you share it online, right? Like I should have identified a few of the folks that I would love to be ambassadors for the film before we get to a release. And hopefully, I would have had some conversations with them. I might have invited them to a screening online, shared a clip, walked them through some stuff, introduced them to the filmmaker, see how the film could be used in their programming. So, all of these things can happen way in advance of we're at the release schedule, right? And like, can you just share this online? It's so challenging to go to someone, particularly an influencer who typically gets paid for promotion and saying to them, can you just share this link? Sometimes people will do it, but a lot of times, like, and especially if I'm dealing with documentaries and it's a social cause that people feel close to, sometimes people will just be like, sure, I'll share this in my story. But then you'll just get like a story share, right? But imagine if I had thought about my audience way ahead of time. I reached out to that influencer or I reached out to that organization and I started a conversation around how this story really fits into their world that creates a different um there's a pre-paving and it creates a different
Ooh,
opportunity once we get to the actual release.
oh, I like that line of pre-paving. It's a good visual to have. And it's true. I think we both worked on social issue films. Oftentimes we have smaller budgets and we want to raise the money so we can pay influencers to engage or pay people for their time or donate to these organizations. I know I often get asked, I'm curious if this happened to you. We've been asked, well, people should just do it because they care. or they should do it because it'll impact them or something. And it's really frustrating because yes, they do care. I care too. You care too. You also like have a life to live. So how do you do you have any advice on kind of navigating that when you have either a client or a studio or a filmmaker that's saying, can we do this for free or cheap? While also still engaging those communities authentically and what they care about, and at the same time respecting the work that they do. Any advice on how to manage that situation?
Yeah. So one, I wouldn't assume that you don't have anything to offer, right? I think sometimes people will think, oh, I don't have any money to offer this person. And so I'm, we should just ask them to do it for free. But like what may, like, perhaps you have some in kind donations laying around the office. I worked on a film festival last year, and they had received like a bunch of in kind gifts over the course of years that they had just accumulated. And I said, okay, in this influencer campaign, why don't we map out, like, okay, which gift we can offer which influencers, right? It turned out, what's funny, it turned out I don't think any of the folks who ended up saying yes actually said, yes, give me a gift. But I think the offer, right? Like,
Mhm.
hey, like the generosity of, we recognize this is a bit of your time. Here's something that we can offer you in exchange. I didn't get not one person that took me up an offer. It was so bizarre. I was like, oh, like, clearly someone's gonna want a bottle of wine, or someone's gonna want, like, these passes to go to this museum, or like, they're really thoughtful local offers to San Francisco. And everyone, like the folks who said yes, just said yes. And if they couldn't do it, they couldn't do it, right?
Yeah.
Well, I just think it's a great idea to just sit there and really think about your platform and what you might be able to offer somebody. Here's another small offer too. Sometimes people want to be in conversation. So maybe this is a piece of content. Oh, would you like to do an Instagram live around this? Like, maybe this becomes a content opportunity that positions the influencer as a thought leader in this subject in some way. It could be as small as that, or it can be as large as, like, here's a gift that I saw that I have in my home that, like, I've never used, but, like, hey, I'm gonna offer this to this person in exchange for their support.
I think it reinforces your values and being care centered and building relationships. It's being thoughtful about the person. I think we've come from a one way world of digital marketing of like pay to push something to an audience. But this is really being thoughtful and reciprocal about it. So that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
So what are some things, don't we don't always like to dig into the negatives. We like to keep it to the positive. So do you have any campaigns or stories of success you want to talk about? Or have you seen any, what you should definitely not do? So I'm sure you've also seen some of that when it comes to, authentically engaging these social and cultural groups. What are some good stories and
So,
maybe some don't do's?
yeah, so I'll start with the don't do's because that's just really easy. The My biggest pet peeve is late. Like, start as early as you possibly can and getting the word out about your film, right? Do not wait until the film's already locked and loaded, and then you're like, "Oh, how do I like, what do I, or it's about to enter Sundance in a week, and then you're like, "Can we do a whole campaign?" And yes, we can figure something out, but it's very stressful on the marketing team to have to move that quickly at the speed of lighting. So I think as soon as you know that you're gonna have a festival premiere, that because there's a lot of different moments over the course of a film, right? So, you're gonna have a festival premiere, broadcast premiere, theatrical, DVD, whatever, like, whatever the window is, that window. So as soon as you know, tell someone,
Mhm.
and bring in a marketer, bring in if you can't afford a team, bring in a social media intern, bring in some sort of support as early on as possible. Don't wait to the very last minute. That would be the thing not to do.
Completely
Um,
agree. That's really good
e
advice.
Exactly, and then the opposite end of that, like, we're talking about audience targeting, but one audience that filmmakers always forget about is, like, their family and friends, right? Like, where we can get really sophisticated and, like, this film is about, the black runners and da da da, and, like, how do we get to that audience, right? Like, we can get very sophisticated, but your first audience is always going to be people who are already following you, people that you went to high school with, people that, from your first job, whatever it is, don't forget those folks. Those are the folks that you can be courting along the way, give them the play by play, the behind the scenes that'll likely follow your career from first film to second film to third film. So, really bringing your people into your stories, having them become a part of that process, and then becoming your advocates, right? And not all of them, maybe the film won't really mean that much to everyone who loves you, but it'll mean something, and they can be great ambassadors. So starting as early as possible with the people in your community would be the advice there. And in terms of the recent campaign, which really changed me as a marketer. So over the last decade or so, I've worked primarily on film campaigns. So a film comes out, and I'm the digital marketing specialist for that release, right? And most recently, in the last year or so, I've been turning my attention more and more to organizations. And then so I worked with this organization called Queer Women of Color in Media and Arts Project, and specifically the 20th anniversary of their film festival. So this is the first time that I've marketed a whole film festival, like bringing
That's a
that was
lot
my
of screening the market.
yeah, it's a lot of screenings, a lot of filmmakers, a lot of it's a film festival, so
Right.
it's a different sort of beast. And it was incredible. It was an incredible experience. I love the team there, and I'm continuing to support them as an organization. But one of the things that I thought we did really well, and I would say that was driven by them as an organization. They're very disability justice and accessibility centered. So I learned how to change my marketing to focus on disability and accessibility. So, not one image would go up on social without having alt text, and writing the alt text inside, like in the tools that social media provides, not just allowing Instagram to figure out what the photo is or whatever have you, but like literally including all the alt text. Thinking about every image, is it a lot of contrast there? Is this readable? Like every single thing, every visual thing that we did um, was thought about in terms of, is this an accessible experience, right? And so I think that really changed how I operate as a marketer and what I want to bring into other campaigns moving forward. And the fact that they're able to be such an accessible, so that's just one part of their organization, accessibility in their marketing materials. But in general, the entire film festival is accessible. They're more accessible than places that have all the money like Sundance or Tribeca. Like
Oh,
there's an organization that measures accessibility, and I think they're like in the top 5 of accessible festivals, and they're super small. So I think that I would say that campaign was something that I was super proud of recently because of my ability to grow as a marketer, an opportunity to grow as a marketer, and to serve more people.
it's also, it sounds like some small changes can have a big impact, right? Like it's a large audience. People who have disabilities, like, are a large audience in the US that has been under catered to. And having some of these small tweaks, whether it's how they hear about it or accessing the theaters, being able to hear or see the content and the Q&As is revenue driving. It does include, going back to your marketing part, like they will buy a ticket. People want to
Exactly.
participate in a great film festival, see great films, and like getting some of those hurdles removed can make a huge difference. That's
Absolutely.
a perfect example. Well, I really just have one last question. Although we can see if there's anything else you want to go into, but I guess if there's any, we may have covered some of this. So what's one piece of advice that you would give to filmmakers who really want to bring their film to specific audiences as they define them, these different social, cultural groups? What is the one thing you want to make sure every filmmaker knows?
Okay. So here's the one takeaway, like that, like if you have to like keep this in the back of your mind, and we talked about it over and over again, but just a very clarifying point. Start with relationships, not reach, right? Right? So like
Yes.
focus on, because and the reason why I'm saying that is because all of us, we all are like, how many followers, how many people engage, how many people like my thing? No one's liking my post. Like no one, and then you get really, you get really you can fall down rabbit holes, or you can get really dejected if you don't get that immediate dopamine hit when you post something and someone supports it and everyone's like, "Yay, good job, filmmaker!" Like, right? Like, if you don't get that dopamine hit, you'll be like, "Oh man, like no one wants to see my film, or no one cares about my work, or how hard it is to create." But if you move from a reach perspective to a relationship perspective, then then you'll understand that when you are creating, you're creating to connect and move the relationship forward, right? And that you are going to, if you start off with two people and you build a relationship with two people, that two people will turn to five people, and that five people will turn to 10 people, and it'll grow because you're focusing on building a relationship with people and not just talking at them, throwing things at them. It's like this difference between putting up a poll, right, and saying, "What do you think about this clip, this 10-second clip? Give me some feedback." Versus, "Here's my poster." Right? You see that that's the difference. Like, bring that
I
one
like
is building a
bringing.
relationship with somebody over time. The other is like, "Here's my finished product. Can you share it?" Like one is about reach, the other one is about relationship. And any filmmaker can do that from any level, starting with relationships, because all of us have access to relationships. So that's not about money. That's not about money, right? Like that's about your willingness to be a little vulnerable, your willingness to open up and to connect with audiences.
That makes a lot. You have a lot of great one-liners in here. I'm so excited to pull so many of these out. Um, is it also? I'm making an assumption here, but there's for a lot of filmmakers, these videos are all about creating a tool set to help filmmakers build their marketing and distribution strategy. And when possible, it is better to work with a team of experts, and you are one of those experts. So essentially, can filmmakers work with you directly to do this? If they're like, I don't have the relationships to start with, I didn't plan earlier. If you're taking on a film, your relationships trust you. Can filmmakers work with you on this?
Absolutely. So, and I work with filmmakers now in two different ways. So initially, as I mentioned, it has mostly been through, you have a film and you want to get it out there, and we're doing the campaign around that film, right? So we still do those type of services. But beyond those, I've recently started offering coaching and courses so that I can be in that one-on-one conversation with the filmmaker around their mindset and opening up their capacity to see the possibilities in front of them. So that's been really enjoyable. I just started doing that coaching one-on-one style engagements this past year. And I would say that's a really great way for indies that don't have a huge marketing budget. Not that we're super expensive. We're not, not that we're super expensive, but like if you don't have a huge marketing budget, it's a great way to work one-on-one, because I can coach you through the process of not only, okay, the strategy, but really the you of it, right? Like what do you need to open up in you in order to engage with people?
That's amazing. Okay, so how do we find you? How do we find you online, LinkedIn, all of that?
Yeah, so I'm everywhere at Chana Ewing. I'm also, you can reach me at littlebigworld.co. I have a new Substack, which I'll place a plug for, and that's just Chana Cubed at so chanacube.substack. I really love write. I've always been a writer, and last year I started my own Substack, and I think that was September, and I've been having so much fun. So it's a great way to engage with me. Follow my Substack as well. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. We'll put your Substack link and the Little Big World link and the ABCs of Equality book link
Yeah.
in the video below. So
Awesome.
thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge and expertise with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christy. This has been so much fun.
And that's our episode. Thank you to our special guest, our producer and editor, Ron Pissarro, and you, the filmmakers, creators, marketers, and distributors that are dedicated to connecting audiences with great films.